2024 has been quite the year for CNC dust collection. If you are not up to date, this video is going to help you understand how all of these makers are making these crazy inventions for dust boots, as well as Ivac being able to solve one particular problem that I've had with the Masso controller that I don't have anymore because of them. If you're brand new here to the channel, my name is Hamilton Dilbeck. We do a CNC woodworking project every single Friday, and that project this week is going to be CNC dust boot testing. So we've got a whole test set up that we're going to be going over to test all of these dust boots in front of me and figure out which one is most useful. Now, a big spoiler, at the very end of this, I am going to talk about how I like different aspects of each one of these boots and why none of them are actually perfect in my eyes. 2024 is really cool because if you know how to design stuff in software and then you also have a 3D printer, you can quickly design prototypes for all of your dust boot needs and iterate on that extremely fast, faster than ever before. So makers beforehand would have to ship stuff off to different manufacturers and wait for prototyping to be done. And now people can do it in their homes, which makes for really awesome inventions for our CNC machines. Each of them do bring something to the table that I wish that was just in one package. We'll talk about that later. First and foremost, I want to mention the similarity between all of the dust boots we're going to be talking today, and that is that they're all Z dependent. What that means is as your router or spindle is going up and down, the actual dust boot itself is attached to the router, and the placement of that dust boot on top of the material is dependent on where your router is going up and down. This is really important for different procedures that you're doing on your CNC machine. So if you're only doing 3D carving and it's going up and down, that's going to be helpful. If you're only doing pockets, also helpful. If you're only going to be doing profile cuts, you do a ton of plywood, this is also going to be helpful. There are some downfalls to it, which we'll get into later, but every single one of these dust boots all are going to ride along the router or your spindle and move up and down. But Winfinity sells something that is independent of your Z-axis, which means that you set it on top of your material and it rides along the top of your material while your router or your spindle goes up and down through the hole and is independent of the Z-axis movement. Now, that's really, really great for beginners, but it also leaves the option for your router to go too far down into it, mess things up, and then kaboom, everything just explodes. That's what happened with mine, but for a lot of people, that's where they start. And honestly, if you're just working with a few different materials, that's the way to go. People start developing these because it really suits a lot of makers overall, and it's going to be a little bit better, but like I said, there's a few drawbacks in there. These dust boots are all each over $100. We'll go into price later, so they are not cheap, and they have been designed specifically for the Winfinity in mind, although a lot of these do fit on other machines. So let's go through each one of these really quickly, and then we will test each one as well. First up is the double barrel. It has a ton of different configurations and ways that you can set this up, and more importantly, this one is very unique in the way that it sets up with an entire system that's meant for dust extraction. So if you do have a laser that mounts on the front of your machine, this is set up where you can quickly throw on different attachments to be able to extract fumes as well as chips. The double barrel is most unique in the way that it mounts directly to the top of your spindle and it stays on your spindle as it's moving up and down. The other two options we're going to be going over later, both can be moved up and down the spindle shaft to be able to accommodate for where the material is, whereas this one makes up for it in the different brushes that it offers. It quickly and easily snaps on due to all these little index pins and magnets, and each one of these rings has a different size brush attached to it. Now, this is an incredible system, and I will say first and foremost for this, regardless of the results, this felt the most premium, and it felt like it was the most industrial version of all the different dust boots that I'm going to be testing today. It has an incredible fit and finish, everything just mounted to the machine as if it was made by the machine manufacturer itself, and I absolutely love this design. Next up is the Raptor. This is from Solify Designs, and all of these right here are Raptors. This is the original Nighthawk that he put out, which is a wonderful, fantastic design. I ran this on my machine for months and months. Had very few issues, really do love this specifically. But this is the iteration that he came up with to be able to make the form factor a little bit smaller, airflow a little bit better. And as you can see, there's different size dust ports that can go on. This is meant for a Makita router, whereas right here we have these versions meant for the Spindle 80 millimeters. Now, the way that this works is this specifically mounts to your spindle, and then this portion comes in and then indexes magnetically attaches. You have these different little dust ports depending on the size dust boot that you use that does magnetically attach. And as you can see right here, they're all a little bit different from each other, but they all essentially do the exact same thing, magnetically attach to each other to be able to pull out of the way. Now the brushes do also magnetically attach. Be able to throw those in, pull those out if you are looking to film things. This is a really great system. One of the things that I do like about it is that these indexing pins really make it easy for future expansion. If he were to come out for some like docks or anything like that, that could be placed on top of the machine so that everything is disconnected, so that you could run the machine and fully film the bit and have this out of the way. And a lot of the people who are using these hobby machines are going to be using them in ways to be able to create content or just be able to show off what they're doing on Instagram. Larger industrial machines are not really worried about a lot of the nuances in CNC dust collection as the hobbyist makers are. If you look at the huge machines, they're not bringing all of the suction directly to the bit. They're doing a very large shroud around the entire assembly and then pumping up because they're using huge vacuums that have like 8-inch diameter hoses. Whereas these are really meant to be able to optimize specifically for shop vacs, dust extractors, or 4-inch tubing. So whenever you have all these little tiny things that are really great for makers, a lot of the more industrial people are looking at this being like, why would you ever need any of these things? Because it doesn't make sense in their world. Whereas for us, it makes a lot of sense. And last but not least is the newest player in the game. This is the Swinger by Rowdy Roman. This is the big thing that has never been done, at least in this space, is putting a hinge on this, which it really did switch things up. It makes bit changes and zeroing a snap, and it also has this little latch that locks things down. So you still have your spindle or your router that mounts right here, and you're still able to put in your dust collection right here. And you've got a viewing window just like the Raptor does as well, so that you can see if you do have any type of clogs. There has been one time where I was cutting material that it created long, thin strands, and it did actually clog up the dust boot. And it was really nice to be able to have a window and see all of that happening and know where to clear it out. But that was just one time. But I will say that the functionality of your dust boot is not dependent on having a viewing window. So all the 3 dust boots that I'm showing off today do have like acrylic or Lexan built into them so that you can see a lot of what's happening. And it is cool, I will agree, but it is not needed for the functionality of the dust boot. I think that a ton of makers are going to start using this hinge design, and you're going to start seeing it pop up all over the internet because of how useful it really is. Now, personally, I'm not a massive fan of the fact that it swings out to the left, because as I'm probing normally from the bottom left of my material, it's hugged up against the rail, and this can be kind of a tight fit when you're trying to change bits or zero out your machine. For those of you that zero in the middle of your material, you're not going to have any problem at all. And I think that this is the biggest thing that I really, really love about this dust boot and kind of dislike about the dust boot. And I'll go over at the end of this about what I think should be done instead of swinging it out to the right. Let's go ahead and test these out on the CNC machine. And in order to do that, I do have a little bit of a Carveco talk for y'all today.
Now, normally I don't go into this side of thing on the videos because it loses a lot of people, but I think it is necessary to understand that for your dust boot to work properly, it needs to work properly in a lot of different ways. Now, any old dust boot can do V-bit carving and be able to get the dust out of there as quickly as possible, but the things that I have found are the most difficult to actually collect dust, especially with a Z-dependent dust boot, are going to be pockets. Now, on here you can see in the orange, this is going to be a very large trough. It's around 8 or 10 inches long, and that's going to give the chips the ability to shoot out the side and actually not go up into the dust boot. So that's where we're going to see the most quote-unquote failure for the dust boot, or at least I think so. I haven't even done these tests yet. Now, next to that are going to be these blue and green pockets. This is going to symbolize the blue being climb milling and then the green being conventional milling, just different ways to cut the exact same thing to see if that is going to mess up the dust collection at all. Now below that we have these 2 squiggly lines. This right here, the pink one and then the aqua one. The pink one is climb milling and then the aqua is conventional milling, but these are going to be profile cuts using the bowl cut bit. As you can see at the very bottom of there, we've got these little gray lines. That's where it's gone all the way through the material, using our bowl cut bit as if we were profiling the material. Now, these 2 very interesting things over to the side, this pink and this purple over here, these are fluting toolpaths. So we're just going to be using our bowl cut bit to do some fluting, creating this little scalloped dish right here, and then this much larger textured area right here. Just 2 other ways for us to be able to see if we're collecting dust off of this MDF or not. Now, one of the really cool things is we've got all this black paper set up around our MDF so that we can quickly see what's being picked up and what's not.
Now, first in the lineup is going to be the double barrel, and last week I showed off that I was checking out a few different lengths of the brushes. And one of the really nice parts about having an oneida dust collector, it is the most powerful thing on the market, and you can have a fairly bad dust boot and still get really good results. And this is the first time that I noticed that it was sucking up the bristles because it is sucking so hard that it was causing a whole lot of blockage and making it so that it wasn't picking things up. So when I was doing this test, I made sure to use the smallest bristles available that came with this, and it really did a lot better. Now, I did talk to the maker of this double barrel, and he was talking about doing things similar to flaring out these brushes, which is why when you're looking at these two models, they have created this where it flares out a little bit and just makes it a little bit more difficult for these bristles to be sucked up into the middle of it. So yes, I do think that it affected the double barrel overall on this test, but like I've been saying, it's really great that all these makers can quickly iterate on their designs and make things better because of how accessible at-home manufacturing is today. Now next we went over to the Raptor, and I was not shocked by this performance because I have been using it for quite a long time on the CNC machine, but I was shocked that it was throwing out chips the exact same way as the double barrel at the very end when we're doing the field of fluting and doing all these little divots. It really seems that that in particular was a quick and easy way for the CNC machine to be throwing chips out to the sides rapidly instead of giving it an opportunity to pick that up because of the movement of the machine and what it was actually trying to do. So that's simulating a whole lot of 3D carving things that people are going to run into. But if I were to have lowered it down on the Z-axis a little bit more, that wouldn't have been an issue at all. But I couldn't have done that because of the first pocket that I was creating. That pocket being much lower means that you need to have this a little bit higher up so that the boot itself does not crash into the wall, which kind of is the Achilles heel of a lot of these Z-dependent dust boots, is it's moving up and down. You really have to make sure that your brush length is appropriate for the size material and the depths that you're looking to achieve in the material that you're cutting. Now, before we test out the Swinger, I do want to mention that Ivac sent this out to me. I've not been paid, they're not expecting any type of review, but this has solved a massive headache in my life. If you have bought a Winfinity Elite system, you know that it can kick on the vacuum cleaner as well as the router all at once, and you just do all of that in your G-code. And I've always been upset because having the best vacuum on the market through Oneida, it's a 220 vacuum and it doesn't work with Masso. Ivac has come in and saved the day on that. It is very simple, out of the box, it just worked, and you can set all of the same delays that you set in your Masso controller. So what that actually means is whenever you start a program, the spindle has to come up to speed and it starts cutting. I think out of the box it's 6 seconds. Where you can change this around as well to be able to match the delays on your spindle starting up so that it kicks on the vacuum at the appropriate time and it kicks off the vacuum as well. I'm the only person in the world who actually has this right now, and they are going to be available very, very soon. If you do want this and you don't want to wait until they launch it, I'll have an email listed down in the description below where you can contact them directly and they will be more than happy to sell you one. I actually just ran into Ivac at IWF, which was great, and they had a little bit of a demonstration on the systems that they've been doing for years before this.
Basically what we have is a detector or a sensor. It's called a Pro Tool Plus, and it's looking for a magnetic field that's running through the power cable. So in this instance, we have a really nice looking table saw here. We're going to turn it on. When we do, this light's going to start flashing. It's going to send a wireless signal to two things, a switch and a blast bead. So the switch is going to be able to turn on your dust collector automatically, which it just did, and open the blast bead. So for every tool in your shop, you would just have to have these two things, and you'd have this one device that would control your dust collectors on and off.
Huge thanks to Ivac for sending this out. I know it seems like a small thing, but having the dust collector just turn on and off as I'm running my programs really does help. And last up is going to be the Swinger. It did have very similar results to the Raptor because their form factor is very similar, but it does have a different user interface, and depending on how you enjoy messing around with your dust boot when zeroing and changing out bits and all that kind of stuff, you're going to prefer one over the other. But they did have very similar results, even when it came down to the field of fluting and it chucking out all the sawdust out the sides and not being able to pick those things up. I know that seems like a really small thing, but the truth is, if you don't have things set up correctly with your dust boot and having it in the right area as you're cutting, and you compound that over an 8-hour long carve, those dust chips really can build up in places on your CNC machine that they should not. Ease of use, installation, price, and durability. I think those are the main things that you need to look at when checking out different dust boots and what makes sense for you. So first, let's go ahead and jump into the price. Now, due to the different factors as far as your dust hose is concerned and the type of spindle or router that you're using, these do have a little bit of variability in the price. So we're going to be doing a plus or minus system. So the Swinger comes in at around $120. The Raptor is around $120, and then the double barrel is around $150. Like I said, these will change a little bit depending on the exact configuration that you need for one of these dust boots. For the rest of these, we're going to be doing a star system. So 5 is the best that you could possibly do. Now, ease of use, when looking at that, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that people are going to really consider when doing one of these. Now, the Swinger, I'm actually going to go ahead and give that 4 stars. 4 out of 5, and it's because there's just one thing that I really wish was different about it. Now, the Raptor itself, I'm also going to be giving 4 stars, and then the double barrel, once again, 4 stars. Now, all of these are going to be the best dust boots that I personally think are available right now. I am not knocking anybody else's designs. There's certainly a ton of different options, and options that are considerably cheaper than these as well. But I do think that these are currently the most compelling ones that are available to us. The double barrel, I will say, its ease of use is on par. Installation was a little bit more difficult, and it's because this thing, when you install it on your machine, it feels like it's a part of your machine. A little bit of spoiler when it comes to durability, this one is, I think, the best made out of all of them as far as the fit, finish, and how thick all of these plastic walls are. When it's mounted to your Winfinity, it feels like it came from the factory. I might have already said that earlier in this video, but it really is something that I cannot just glaze on by. It takes a second to install because of all of these different parts, making sure that everything is lined up. But once you do install it, I don't think that you would ever remove it because you're just switching out all the little dust skirt inserts at the bottom, and you're never really moving this part around because it is static to your spindle. Well, that proves the point. I don't think it gets much easier than the Swinger or the Raptor, so I'm going to be giving both of these 5 stars. And then let's go ahead and jump over to the durability. This one by far gets 5 stars, and I have used these two a ton, and I've not broken them at all. I will say that the maker of this dust boot, Rowdy Roman, he has sent me over a few different things, and I break things all the time. To the point where one time I was like, hey, I broke this thing, and he was like, Hamilton, you're the only person who's breaking stuff. I am really hard on the tools that I own, and when I have tools in the shop, I expect them to perform to a certain level. I've been very hard on all of these, throwing them around the shop, and especially as I'm changing things out, and none of them have broken. This one feels by far the most durable, so these are both going to get 4 out of 5 stars. This will get 5. And that leaves us with the Swinger being at a 4.3 star, the Raptor at a 4.3 star, and then the double barrel at a 4 star. So all of these are going to be 4 out of 5 star options, and I think currently if you are looking for a dust boot, these are the ones that you really should look at. They each are going to be able to bring something different to the table, which brings me to the end of this segment. How could these be better? I really love this form factor. I love being able to throw it on the CNC machine. And I love that both of these have the aspects where you can take things off, you can get to your bits and change them out. Now I will say that this one also was extremely easy just to be able to pop off the entire bottom, zero everything, and then change out the dust skirts to be able to accommodate the different size material that you're using. So the biggest thing that I love about this is the fact that it attaches to your machine and it doesn't feel weak. It doesn't feel like it's going to get popped off. It doesn't feel like it's obtrusive in the entire CNC operation. Whereas these, they're poking out very far from the very front of the machine. So if you are doing things on the very edge, it can hit the Masso screen, in particular when dealing with a Winfinity. So I really like the aspect that this one is very sleek. Its form factor really looks like it's meant on the machine. I really don't like the fact that it swings out to the side. I've even talked to Peter about that. This is not going to be a surprise to him. I personally, for all of these to be able to line up and make it the best dust boot in the world, I personally love the design where there's going to be something like this that attaches and stays static on the spindle, and then you have an area like this, and instead of it going in or switching out, it goes up. So it would be really great if there was some type of a magnet right here, and then you could put a magnetic strip on the very front of your Winfinity machine where the laser modules are meant to hook up to. So as you're cutting and as you're moving things around, you can pop this up, it'll magnetically attach, and then this is on some type of a swivel where your dust hose can come out from the top and it go down and just link up like this. So if somebody ends up making that, where instead of it going in, it goes up and there's little hinges on the side of here somehow, that would be fantastic. So out of these 3 options, what do you think is the best and why specifically would you choose it? I know there's a few other options on the market, so please Let me know down in the comments below if you feel like I was being unfair and I should have been reviewing something else as a part of this as well, because I would love to look into it and figure out specifically why. I know that I really didn't talk about the Nighthawk too much in this, and that's because these are the newest versions out there. So if you look at the Nighthawk and you think that that's the best one for you too, I used it for a long time and I am very pleased with the results on that as well. This exact test file is going to be available for all you CNC with me members. So you at home, if you have a different dust boot than this and you've been looking to upgrade to something else, you can run that test file on your machine with your current setup and see what's actually being collected, and then see what I showed in my video and be able to figure out a little bit if it's worth the upgrade for you. Now, I know that it's going to be a little bit different depending on the dust collector that you're using, but hopefully you will be able to get similar results based on having the exact same file. We'll have that file in Carveco and Vaccuum for you just to be able to save your G-code and run on your machine immediately, but also SVG and DXF. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see y'all next Friday. Bye.